Good morning, everyone. Welcome to LED. This is Leadership with Ed, the podcast that I host where we drop it every other Wednesday, bright and early on that. It drops on Spotify, Apple, and also YouTube. So make sure you like, subscribe, just do something so we can continue to increase our membership going forward. I want to thank everyone that has been a part of this inaugural season, and very, very excited today because I have one of my all-time favorites that we get to talk to. We're shifting gears a little bit on this leadership journey that I've been on for the past, 30 plus years of, running my own firm, but then also studying great clients, just people in the industry, reading books, etc. on leadership. And a lot of times it deals with people that have already made their way through the journey. Today we're going to be talking with Matt Aaron, one of the young up-and-coming superstars, incredible entrepreneur, great way of thinking and leader, and someone that's near and dear to my heart. That's going to talk more about the journey he's been on in leadership as a youngin'. Because Matt, how old are you? You're only
33.
33. So I think this might be our youngest guest ever on LED. So this is exciting, but it's fun to highlight people, at different stages of this leadership journey. And so Matt Aaron's based in out east in the D.C. area. Been running a great wealth management firm called Lux Wealth Management, which is LUX. Matt is an incredible follow, by the way. I follow him on LinkedIn, but has all the different channels in YouTube, and that can range from incredible just leadership anecdotes to, that's how I learned he got a dog. Started seeing Royal show up on his on his feed. I knew his wife was pregnant with their first baby, Madison. But I got to follow that journey along the way. So I would encourage all of you to follow Matt after this, and we'll post his stuff at the end of the episode so you can see that. But welcome, Matt, and glad to see you today.
Thanks, Ed. It's definitely an honor and a privilege.
Yeah, and he is awake. So like I said, he just had his first baby, and so we wanted to make sure to catch him when he did have some energy on this side. Now, Matt, you and I got introduced, through the Northwestern Mutual system. Both of our wealth management firms are affiliated with Northwestern Mutual, and so we knew a little bit about each other from some of the different conferences. But I would say our relationship really went to the next level with Next Level Mentoring. How do you like that one? That was pretty good right there.
You landed that one.
Thanks. Next Level Mentoring, a great program, basically, started or engaged through the Northwestern executive leaders and some of us in the field. But why don't you talk about Next Level Mentoring, how we came about, and what that's just meant to you?
As you mentioned, through the affiliation with Northwestern Mutual, that really created at least the space for us to, just share naturally. Like, that's just the culture of us sharing ways to grow together. But there was a gap in, I think the gap in the access to good leadership, good mentorship, and everybody has different levels of access naturally through their success. But, we want, the leadership team wanted to create a space where senior and mature.
He's saying like polite way to say mature. The seasoned. Old white guy, seasoned. We like that. Veteran, seasoned.
Who might have had access at a greater level, but then ultimately just had their, success building their firms, and they, did a really good job of being intentional around partnering mentors and mentees in a way where, they could both benefit at the greatest level through congruency in mindset, philosophies, and that's why Ed and I connected. I knew Ed had, a big vision for the future. I knew he had a more sophisticated firm, and they were doing the deal, comprehensive financial planning at the highest level. And, that's how I see us at Lux, but also know that they're, we're certainly ahead of where we were. So they say, a fool learns from their own mistakes and a wise person learns from others. So I was willing to and excited to learn from Ed's mistakes, and he was willing to share them. And it's been a great mentorship. And even as the program has sunsetted a little bit here, but in terms of not the program necessarily, but Ed and ours structured mentorship, we still continue to keep a good connection and relationship. So I'm grateful for it and love everything you're doing.
Yeah, and what was cool about the program too is the mentorship, and it really turned into, I was supposed to be the mentor, Matt the mentee, and what I realized quickly, Matt became a peer because there was things that I could see in his vision and where he was going, but also it was interesting because the pairing really was tied to this industry where it is dominated by older white dudes, the wealth management industry in general. And it was really pairing with young African-American advisors that maybe didn't have either access or knowledge of what was possible. Because Matt, when you say even today, it's gotten better, but there wasn't a lot of advisors or firms that look like you or were building what you wanted to do. Tell us a little bit about, has that made it harder as you've built this incredible firm? Has it opened doors, or did you just have to ask more questions, ask for more help? Tell me a little bit about just the journey as an African-American advisor in a dominated world by, the status quo almost.
Yeah, and that's a loaded question.
Starting off hot right here early in the morning. Man. How's that?
All right, so I would say, I tried, just from a mindset standpoint, I really try to not think about myself as, the African-American advisor versus, an advisor an entrepreneur and business owner that is striving to be the best and, my best self and, serve at the highest level. And I happen to also be African-American. And I think that also has really allowed me to, make huge strides because I didn't allow that to be a distraction. Oftentimes people use it as a distraction. Now, I understand there's some realities to, access, but I was a firm believer that if you do the work, access can become available. You just got to be willing to maybe do a little bit more than maybe a peer might have to. And so that's really the mindset shift that I continue to try to press upon other African-American advisors is that, just make it undeniable.
Oh, I love that. Yep.
And just, how do you, and you got to outwork your self-doubt. So I really, I was never really the smartest person on the block, but I knew I could outwork everybody. And as a result, that feedback loop that I was getting from putting in the work is what then allowed me to, on the outside, look like I was really smart, but I just was smart enough to, learn and listen to the right people and try to cut through the clutter and the noise. And so, but again, I don't want to, belittle or downgrade the realities that there are just proximity access. They always say, you're influenced by the people you spend the most time with. Well, if I'm spending time with people who don't know what's possible, they never seen what's possible, then inherently I'm kind of putting myself in this box and I don't really get to dream. But when I come out of the box and I go spend proximity with folks like Ed, like you, I'm able to see kind of, oh, okay, why does Ed do that? Oh, why does Ed say that? Why does he sequence these decisions in this way? And as a result, it helps me to start develop mental models and frameworks that I can apply in my world, which actually then becomes my strategic advantage, right? So if I'm Black, I know within the Black community, I can take what I'm learning in another community and apply it in my community, but uniquely design it for us. And that then makes it a win for everybody.
God, that was just awesome. Hopefully everyone was taking great notes there. And what Matt was probably wanted to say, but he's too kind, is after spending some time with me, he said, Ed's really not that impressive. So
I just said, hey, man, we're actually probably quite alike.
But you said something about the vision and trying to just build what you could see. I read a great article that Matt had wrote, again. This was on LinkedIn, where it says your vision has to be bigger than your reality. And you talked about starting to wear suits in college, and you said some of your peers were, as you said, clowning you and kind of joking and jabbing you, like, what are you doing? But you said, I was already a businessman. I carried myself like one, not because I was trying to impress anyone, but I had a vision for my future that was bigger than my current reality. So talk about that, but also, how did that idea to come to you at such a young age to say, this is my vision? How did you get to that point, in college? But yeah, talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so it's funny. We were just talking about this in my family, and because Christian and I met in college, and she would see me walking around with a suit and a briefcase, and she was like, "What is this guy doing?" Right? She didn't give me a time of day at that time, but it worked out over time. Through persistency and and all the things you learn in entrepreneurship.
That's where you learn grit. And by the way, his wife, Christian, just a beautiful young woman, is a pastor, and so she, got into ministry. And what a great name! So talk about incredible branding, for her, to be on that side. So how'd you get her attention, though? So you're kind of the guy walking around the suit and the briefcase. So before you finish the vision thing, what was the attention getter?
It was just persistence.
You wore her down,
and we didn't really start dating until after college.
Okay.
We met. We saw each other at a wedding, and I was, definitely an elevated version of who I was when she first met me, and she was always awesome. That's just her. She's just naturally gifted in that way. Some people like me just got to work really hard and outwork our self doubt and all the things. So, but in terms back to the vision piece though. So, as it relates to the vision and having that vision, it actually started when I was a kid. When I was a kid, growing up in the inner city, I always knew that I wanted more. I read a book when I was 13 years old called Millionaire by a guy named Farrah Gray, and he was the first self-made millionaire by the age of 14. And he grew up in the projects. He created like a syrup. And that story just hit me, and it was like, huh. And that was kind of just doubling down on how smart I was. That was the first book that I read cover to cover at like age 14, at 13, but it hit me.
It hit you, life changing.
I just had the spirit in me, and from there I just started going into entrepreneurship. And so when I got to college, I knew that brand was everything, and if I could start to brand myself as somebody who's serious and someone who is dependable, consistent, then I knew that was the first place where you start to build trust. And that brand and that trust then is what even allowed me to get access to the Northwestern Mutual, because I interned at Northwestern Mutual, and I kind of networked my way up all the way to sit down with the president at Northwestern Mutual at the time, Skip Polliner. And then he called Leo in the DC office, the local network managing partner, and said, you got to meet this kid. And Leo flew up in Milwaukee when I was there at the time, and I presented to him my vision of what I wanted to accomplish 3, 5, 15 years, personally, professionally, and financially. It was all laid out and documented and everything. And he's like, and how old are you again? And and so I was just a freshman in college, and that's how I got connected with him.
God, that is awesome. And think about the foresight that Matt laid out for himself, and that's one of the other pieces where you said people won't believe in you until you believe in yourself first. So it sounds like you were starting to shape that belief and then get that out there to the world, and then someone that recognizes talent. Leo Tucker, though, in this example, I'm not sure that's a hard thing to realize if a freshman is showing you that. So we don't want to give them too much credit. But in that one of saying, okay, this person's special. Now, I think what's interesting is if you read the book Traction, speaking of books, they talk about the visionary and then the operators, who can see that big picture, but then who's going to actually implement that. I found you to be unique in our time together, very unique, because you do have those visionary skills of where you want to go. And it is pretty amazing when Matt does get going and talks about where his firm is heading, the impact. And so with him, it isn't just the size of the firm, it's the impact on multiple communities, multiple people, the people on his team that he cares so much about. So you have the visionary part, but you track like every minute of your day and the operational side. So very few people can be a visionary. Very few people then add the marketing. Maybe those two go a little bit closer together. But to add the operational part is where most people have to delegate that. And I know you're good at delegation, but talk about those three components and how you've been able to master different parts of them, because you're a unicorn that way. That doesn't exist much, Matt.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think a lot. I think the integrator or operator part of me came from pain. You know, truthfully, because I started to see just this pattern. Pattern recognition is one of my gifts I think God has given me, and so I really kind of have this like mindset around pattern recognition of what happened in the past. How do I use that to inform how I think about the present moment, which is going to be where I'm looking at like pattern utilization. And then when I'm trying to create a future, I look at pattern creation. So this connectivity between the vision and then taking the data to increase the probability of success. And when I started to, I love business. And so one of the things that makes a business more valuable for everybody, all stakeholders, the community, the customers or clients you serve, along with your team and yourself as an equity owner, the way you build value for them and for everybody is you figure out a way to have forward progress and momentum with the least amount of risk. And the way that you can
say that again, Matt.
The way you increase value over time for everybody is to have forward progress momentum and try to reduce risk to the greatest degree. A lot of times business owners want to go and they've been told this kind of lie that entrepreneurship is about taking a ton of risk. And yeah, there is some risk, but there can also be a formula. Like there's been enough businesses now where it's not like we're starting anything new. There's a formula around what creates success in business. You take a lot of action, you find a need, you serve people, and you do it well for a consistent and a long period of time. And then you reduce the risk of not doing that for them. And then they won't leave, and then they stay, and you increase your lifetime value of the client, right? If you don't know your metrics and your data, it's hard for you to make real strategic decisions and try to find asymmetric opportunities to get massive upside with significantly less risk. And so when I started to see after being in thousands of meetings, I'm like, man, there's a disconnect on why people don't achieve their goals consistently and why they don't have like the progress and happiness. And a lot of it comes from excessive optimism, unexamined assumptions, and no risk management. So if I want to have a big vision for the future, but I have to have some level of mature optimism where I'm not sloppy with it, right? It has to be very intentional. It's like, hey, we can go really high, but if we don't hit the target, how do we still win? And so that's how I'm always thinking from that lens. And that's why I think I've started to develop this operator kind of mindset, because I just want to try to put us in the best position to win consistently for a longer than average period of time.
So as I was listening to Matt say that, here's some things that are going through my mind. I love the part of the mature optimism because probably has hurt some small business owners, and you hear the statistics of failing is there is a grinding mentality. There is, I'm going to succeed no matter what, but then they blindly deploy capital or they blindly create a vision without examining, well, what has to happen for that vision to work and what things can I put into place to reduce down some of the risk. There's always risk as an entrepreneur, but how can I take calculated risk that if this doesn't work out exactly the way you heard Matt say, that we still end up in a good spot. And then at this stage, Matt, I would assume it's making sure you don't do anything to take your business off a cliff or to take your clients off a cliff. Or when I think of taking a business off a cliff where Matt could say, I want 10 offices across the country, and he goes all in today, just buys a lot of real estate, opens offices all over the place, and didn't have a solid plan for that, that is something that could take you off a cliff. And how does your team, as a leader, how do you get that vision to your team? Talk now about some of the things with your team and your own leadership skills, because you've built a really great team, and not everyone is in DC. You actually have a lot of remote employees, and team members. So let's talk about, how you're getting your vision across.
So I think just one, communication, just having a high level of communication in that I can't repeat it enough of what we're doing, what we're building and what's most important. A lot of times, you might say something once, but it doesn't land. You got to say something, I think they say 7 times before somebody actually really hears it. And while I don't like that, it's just the reality, right? And that's why the data is the data. So I'm like, okay, well, if on average 7 times, then I'm going to say it at least 7 times. And until I say it 7 times, then I didn't reduce my risk to the lowest degree that I had control over, right? So, but that's just like a frame, even in that example, right? Like using that frame of saying, okay, on average, it takes 7 times. So you know what? Maybe if I do it 10 or 20 times, then I beat the average, so I naturally likely have a higher, potential for success. So I would say high communication, and then caring about their vision. We do something called PPF planning, where we look at everybody's personal, professional, and financial plan, and then we try to connect their needs and wants and desires to the firm. And if I can push them on what they want, then we'll naturally get what we want as an organization and as the community. So I like to try to find this kind of mutuality, no pun intended, in that, I want everybody to be in alignment. And then the last thing I would say is being like radically transparent and fair. Like,
I like that. Yep.
I just try to, I show everybody my numbers and everything. There's nothing to hide. Like, I'm 100% transparent on everything, on why I make a decision, where we're at, why, and try to educate them along the way. Because if I can educate them around what does it mean to run a business, they can, while they might not, be in the seat of driving or running the business, they can at least think from that lens as much as possible. So we try to take a step back and not only just educate them on what we do as a service to our clients, but also what we do, as a business, because I need them thinking long term. And I think I need them having a similar mental models as me, so we're all functioning off the same frame.
See, and that's awesome. And hopefully everyone wrote down there with the PPF, the personal, professional, and financial, as opposed to Matt saying the firm is going here and there isn't that connection, or for some maybe be connected because they're like, oh, this is going to be a fun journey, but others going, well, how's this pertain to me and what I want to do? Matt spending time with each of the team members to really connect their vision to the firm's vision. Because once he knows those things, he can say, well, if we're able to grow this way and I can develop you in this way, then you're going to hit all of these things, which ultimately helps Lux and all the clients. And then the second one, just can't repeat enough. that was interesting. You said the 7 times, because it does seem sometimes you're being redundant, and you're like, I've already said this, but then he just said, but that's the math is the math, the data is the data, and also you have to be creative in saying it slightly different. In terms of just saying the exact same way. How are you empowering others on the team then? Because I bet some people, when they're listening now, say, okay, Matt, if you want to build $1 billion firm, which is what Matt's goal is. And when he talks about that, though, it always comes back to the clients and his team members. That if they build this, yes, there's some, economic benefit to Matt and his family, but I think it's more the economic benefit to the clients, to the team, to the community, showing people what's possible. But that isn't going to happen if you can't replicate yourself, if you can't delegate and do things. And how hard has that been to relinquish control in some other areas? Tell us about your leadership skills of developing others on your team so that the firm can grow.
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to the math. Because I track all my data, like in terms of my time and where it's spent, I know when I'm being inefficient, and I spot it, and I quickly try to get it, to redeploy that inefficiency. And while it might be inefficient for me, it can be an opportunity for somebody else. So I try to find, okay, how, again, going back to congruency, well, I might find something to be extremely energy draining, but it could be energy, inducing for somebody else, right?
That they actually like doing it.
And they like doing it. So I'm like, here you go, and I, serve it on the platter, But that's really what it has been for me, is tracking. And then I have like a little code in my calendar where I put SMH. So anytime it says SMH, it's something that I don't want to do, or something I don't enjoy doing, or something that just clearly something I should not be doing. And then that's when I go and I look at the end of the quarter, and I can pull all of that. And then I got now almost like a potential job description for somebody. And then I say, okay, what is this? Is there any commonalities here? Like, can I group this? Some of this is like, all right, this is personal. Maybe I got to hire a personal assistant for that. This is group here. This, who has capacity, who could take that over? And now it becomes fundamental. And I'm not just like creating work just for the sake of creating work. I'm creating work to create capacity to buy back my time, which allows me to serve at the highest level. A lot of times we think about delegating according to the vision, but I'd rather first delegate in according to what will allow me to be at my highest level. Because if I have more energy, if I'm better, then naturally the firm naturally overall becomes better. John Maxwell calls something called the law of the lid, right? And so, I really thinking about like, okay, how do I increase my lid? How do I, and there is no lid, right? But like, how do I keep increasing that opportunity, which will naturally help to impact everybody else? It could sometimes feel selfish, but in the moment, right? Like when you're thinking about it, but then it's like, no, that's the best way I can utilize the stakeholders' resources.
Well, and I like that too. And I think because you're a good person, and I've run across this too, of just the more things I say no to, the faster we can grow to. But it's hard if you're a good person and you get calls, and now you are someone that is showing a path that others really of any, background can call and say, Matt, it always starts the same way. Can I just get 10 minutes to ask you this one question? And then I'm like, well, what question do you have? And I'm like, dude, that's like a 4-day seminar, but then you feel bad because people have helped you along the way. How are you controlling the time, or how are you giving back really to, it doesn't even have to be now at this point, the African-American community, which I know is important to you with the advisors, but it really is what you're building transcends, the Northwestern system. How are you making decisions of where you give back your time, and how are you protecting it? Which is going to get even harder now when you add the variable of a young daughter there that's going to want daddy's time, and your wife saying, dude, you're up. I need you at home right now.
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult. Honestly, it's more difficult than even it's not, but it feels more delivery. It feels more difficult than even building a business sometimes, because I have to, I just again say, okay, I can't be everything to everybody, and I gotta have some boundaries. Otherwise, I will never actually accomplish the vision. So I say, okay, and I thought about this coming into this year in 2025. I said, how can I do this in a way where I can feel like I've prioritized it, but I also didn't let it disrupt. So when I was engineering my calendar, I just dedicated like office hours, within my kind of calendar structure. So that way I can guilt-free just give up that time knowing that it was already dedicated. And so anybody can kind of come after that time. And that becomes, just available. But once I'm out, I'm out. It's, and I try to look at it as objective as possible to take my emotions out of it. Is that, we only have so much time, money, and energy, right? And we all have limited resources. Even the most wealthiest person has limited resources, right? And so I just say, okay, with the limited amount of resources, what can I give up that's reasonable, that can serve others, but also not, stifle the growth of, our organization and my family.
That's awesome. And, as you were not only talking about that, but just this whole journey of being an entrepreneur, what role did your parents have? Because I've met your dad. He's an awesome dude. Great smile like you. Loved meeting him in Atlanta. But what were your parents entrepreneurs? Because you mentioned about it's Irvington, New Jersey. You grew up, right? Is that correct? Okay. What was their role in shaping this?
Yeah, that's a great question. My parents are awesome.
They are. Well, I've never met your mom, but your dad's a cool dude. I like him.
Yeah, my dad. Well, you can tell. I didn't get the. I'm not shy. I think. My dad. He will. I'm like, man. One day I gotta hire him because he'll talk to anybody and everybody, right? And and so I would say maybe I got that from him when I was younger. Seeing him, we'll be out and about, and he'll talk to anybody. We could be in a supermarket, in the grocery store, and he's just talking to some random person. And I was like that when I was younger. I think a little bit. I'm probably a little bit more reserved now than I was then, just because I get tired of talking to people. Unfortunately, I talk to so many people as a job. All right, I just want to just not talk to anybody when I walk out the door sometimes. But growing up though, I wasn't that way. I would talk to anybody. You'd be in an elevator, I'm talking to you, because I knew that, again, the relationships and the more you have access to people and they trust you, and I just knew that goes a long way. So I learned that from my dad, and just hard work. Both my mom and dad are hard work. They wake up, they just get after it, and then they still do what they need to do at home. And growing up in an inner city, there's so much distractions that come at you. And they've done just a great job of protecting me as much as they can. They couldn't protect me 100% just because they were at work and I'm home, and it's easy to get distracted. But they did what they could, and they made a lot of sacrifices. Sometimes I wondered, why do we still live here here, and why does your car handle don't work? But then they sent me to private school, and they made these sacrifices because they're like, well, we'll rather invest in you and your education than in a new car. And it blows my mind sometimes when I see people who are making multiple six figures. My dad just started making six figures, right? And so for the longest, neither one of my parents made six figures, but neither one of me and my sister had to take out. I had to take out $5,000 in student loans. That's nothing, compared to what my peers who had to take out 70, 80, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and to send your kids through private school, kindergarten, all the way through college, off of not making six figures. It blows my mind every time. And be on track for retirement. Think about that. What?
That is amazing. I love that story, though, that the opportunities and the education they're providing for you and your sister were more important, than the car. And I even had that with my own kids when they were younger, Max. I've been in the same house now for 25, 30 years, or different things, and they'd be like, "Dad, this person's doing so well," and et cetera. And I just kind of smile because I go, well.
Possibly.
Big hat, no cattle can also be, the terminology, because I knew a lot of times what they made, and I was more focused on, building a business and long-term, generational type wealth. And I always wanted to be able to make decisions for the firm and the clients based on what was in the best interest of them versus a lifestyle that I needed to support. And so it resonated with me. And those stories we have when we're growing up, with my dad of having, when he lost his job, the food stamps, the government cheese, those things, you start realizing, okay, but what's really, really important. Last question I wanted to ask you. I see you
Hey,
post.
can I make a comment
Oh,
about
sure.
that?
Yeah.
So I would say that that's another thing that attracted me to you was that because I kind of looked at you as like the closest thing I'm gonna get to Warren Buffett. you know,
That's a nice thing. He's 2 hours away. He has a different balance sheet than me, but he's only 2 hours away.
but hey, compounding is only a matter of time sometimes. You know,
Yep.
but I can just see it now, right? Like I can see the pattern because again, one of my gifts is pattern recognition. I can see when someone has the mindset of building for the future, investing in others, and being modest and thoughtful about it versus kind of, being super flashy. And again, doesn't mean that people can't have nice stuff. Like you could totally do that. Like you can see I have a little Ferrari right here in the background. Like I want to get a Ferrari, but I said I'm not getting my Ferrari until it feels like I just bought a Honda. Until it feels like I bought a Honda, it's not happening, right? But I know that what the other side, more often than not, when people are flashy and they have that stuff, they usually don't have wealth. Usually, not saying that's always the case, but they usually don't have wealth. And so that's what really gravitated, me to you, because that means you could be a lot more thoughtful. And you're not making rush decisions. You're not just shooting off the hip. It's things that, because you have this space in your mind, this mental capacity to think clearly, and it's not cluttered with like the noise of pressures that are not actually positive pressures, they're negative. So sorry, I just thought it was worth me saying that because that's what I thought about when you were talking. I'm like, man, Ed is probably my closest thing to Warren Buffett. That's one of my
That was one of the greatest things. And my wife and I, we do choose to spend money in other areas that probably aren't seen. And that's important to us. And both, your background shapes that. So thank you very much, Matt. That was kind. I wanted to get just a shout out there to Patrick and Brian Ford, Patrick Scott, because I see you posting on LinkedIn together, even though you're running 3 different firms, all successful in their own right. Tell me a little bit, what's the purpose of that? Is that to elevate them and yourself or elevate others? Let's end with that question there, because I love those two. They're fun to see, and I really enjoy seeing your posts together.
Yeah, going back to the proximity and people you're spending time with, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Patrick and Brian because they have those similar qualities of wanting to do something special, build something, have a high level of impact, but also in a humble and just thoughtful, meaningful way. And it started off as, I would say, more like a study group, but it really has turned into like a brotherhood for us. And we meet every Friday. Like, there's not a lot of people. I mean, I just told you how, judicious I am about
with your time. Yep.
with my time. So for me to spend, it's a 30-minute block. Very rarely does it only last 30 minutes. Sometimes, likely, it usually lasts about an hour. And for me, just that time is just special. Like I could be on vacation, I still keep that meeting. Like because sometimes it's not even all business, sometimes it's personal, and we're going through things, and we can talk about. Now all of us are having a family now, and so so for us to have this like very dynamic conversation around how we can elevate each other, but then how we can elevate others, through serving. That's really what that's about, and we just, hope to be a positive influence on, our community, but just really anybody who cares to build something special.
And what I would add to that, besides just being, great guys, what makes me so happy when I see that for the three of you, because I really enjoy all three of you, so it's fun to see that brotherhood, as you said. But as you continue to build, Matt, and same way with Patrick and Brian, is it gets harder to find people that know what you're going through. There's a lot of people that have a firm at this size that you can talk to and say, what are you going through? When you get to where you're going and where you're heading, those courageous conversations become harder to find people that can actually relate and then provide valuable insight. So I would encourage you to keep those relationships going. I love hearing that it very rarely gets canceled because they're building something right along with you in Tallahassee, Florida, and then Atlanta, Georgia on that side. But that is one of the things I see. You're only 33 now. The 43-year-old Matt's, if you didn't have those in place, is going to be looking around saying, who can I actually talk to and share things with and be vulnerable with? You do need those truth sayers in your life that can really challenge you in your thinking, both as a parent, as a husband, as a business owner, in the community, et cetera. So love hearing that's on there. And plus they're just going to like that I got them added into the conversation. So that's because at least Patrick was upset saying, why is Matt on there and not me? So we'll see if he keeps growing and building, we can add him. Any last parting words that you want to add today, Matt? Because we're wrapping up. And
I would say first, just grateful to have this conversation because the 23-year-old Matt, is like, well done. You to be able to be on a platform like yours. I could barely put two words together. I feel like when I was younger, right? Like I remember I didn't really start reading it until 14. I read that one book, and I don't even know the book after that I read. But like it's just now like to see all the investments in my development through people like you, to be able to now kind of come here and communicate that effectively and have it resonate with you and your listeners, and hopefully it's just helpful for somebody else who has a dream and trying to do something, and they just need to know that like if you put the work in and you're super intentional, anything is possible. You just got to believe it and do the work.
That is awesome, and I can't wait to have this same conversation with the 43-year-old Matt and see how you have grown and progressed. And what I would add before saying thanks, everyone, is that when you are as curious and hungry and want to learn like Matt, it makes it real fun to dive into that person. So I know our team loved that, Matt, because you always came prepared. You always had great questions, and it moved from the mentor-mentee to truly, just peer-to-peer. Love you to death. So excited about the new addition with Madison and how you're going to be as a father, as a business owner, as a husband. Just keep growing, staying humble and hungry, and appreciate you, Matt. So thanks for being on here today. This is Ed McGill signing off for LED, Leadership with Ed. Thank you for joining us. And Matt, appreciate you, my friend.
Thank you.